The envelope lay on the polished dining table, its gold edges gleaming under the chandelier light. Rebecca stared at it for a long time, her hands trembling slightly before she dared to touch it. She knew that handwriting, elegant, arrogant, dripping with superiority. It belonged to Andrew, her ex-husband. With a reluctant sigh, she slid a finger under the flap and pulled the heavy card free. "You are cordially invited," the words made her chest tighten. It was an invitation to his anniversary gala, hosted in the grand ballroom of the city's most exclusive hotel. She blinked, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Of all the people in the world, why would Andrew want her there? They had not spoken in years, not since the divorce papers were signed and she had walked away with nothing but a suitcase and her dignity. She read further, her heart sinking. The card was ostentatious, almost mocking, with golden cursive letters and embossed crests. It wasn't just a party, it was a parade of wealth and prestige. And then she noticed the subtle detail. Her name was handwritten, set apart as though deliberately chosen. She could almost hear Andrew's voice, dripping with derision. "Let her come. Let her see what she lost. Let her crawl in with her thrift store dress while I stand tall with my new wife." Rebecca sank into the chair, pressing her forehead into her palm. Memories flooded back. How he used to sneer at her simple dreams, how he told her she'd be nothing without him. For years she had lived under the shadow of his superiority, until the day she found the courage to leave. But leaving meant starting over with nothing, and though she had survived, she knew Andrew assumed she was still struggling in the same pitiful state he left her. Her best friend, Clara, called that evening. "You got it, didn't you?" she asked immediately, her voice heavy with both sympathy and outrage. Rebecca hesitated. "Yes. I don't know why he." "Because he wants to humiliate you," Clara snapped. "He wants you to show up so he can laugh in your face." "Don't go, Rebecca. Don't give him the satisfaction." Rebecca's gaze drifted back to the glittering invitation card. A knot of anger and hurt twisted inside her. She could almost see Andrew's smug smile as he introduced his glamorous wife and paraded his wealth. She pictured the whispers of the guests, the pointed fingers, the unspoken pity for the poor ex-wife who had failed. But then, a calm resolve began to rise in her chest. She thought of her little boy, Daniel, asleep in the next room. She thought of the years she had clawed her way back, the sacrifices she had made, and the unexpected kindness that had entered her life in the form of Nicholas, the man who had shown her that real wealth had nothing to do with money, but with respect, loyalty, and love. "Maybe I should go," Rebecca said quietly. Clara gasped. "Are you insane?" "Why?" "Because he thinks I'm broken. He thinks I'll crawl. I'm not that woman anymore." Rebecca's eyes hardened as she spoke. "If he invited me to be a spectacle, then let him have a spectacle. Just, not the one he expects." Her friend was silent for a moment, and then a slow smile entered her voice. "You've already decided, haven't you?" Rebecca exhaled, a shaky but determined breath. "Yes. I won't hide anymore." She set the invitation down on the table, the golden letters no longer mocking but fueling her determination. Andrew thought he held the upper hand, but he had no idea what was coming. For the first time in years, Rebecca felt the strength of her own power, the certainty that she would walk into that ballroom not as a victim, but as a woman who had risen far above his shallow world. As the night grew deeper, she stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. Her reflection stared back at her, a woman who had been broken, but rebuilt stronger than before. Tomorrow, she would begin her preparations. Tomorrow, Andrew would learn that the wife he once dismissed as poor was no longer his to laugh at. The grand ballroom glowed like a palace, chandeliers scattering light across marble floors polished to a mirror's sheen. Andrew stood near the entrance, dressed in a tailored tuxedo that hugged his frame in all the right places, his arm looped around his new wife, Vanessa. She sparkled with diamonds from neck to wrist, her gown cut to ensure every eye noticed her. Guests murmured compliments as they passed, champagne glasses clinking, laughter floating in the air like a melody. But beneath Andrew's confident smile was anticipation. His eyes kept flicking toward the entrance, waiting. He could barely contain his smug satisfaction. Tonight would be delicious. His poor ex-wife would stumble in, humbled and plain, forced to witness everything she had thrown away. He imagined the whispers, the pitying glances, the way Vanessa would laugh later about Rebecca's outdated dress. The thought alone made his chest swell with pride. Still scanning the door, Vanessa teased, sipping her drink. Her ruby lips curved into a sly smile. Andrew chuckled. "Just making sure our guest of honor arrives. After all, it's only fair she sees what she missed out on." Vanessa tilted her head, amused. "Cruel. But I like it. As the orchestra swelled, the murmur of conversation dipped. Heads turned toward the massive entrance doors, which had just opened. A hush spread through the room, followed by a ripple of gasps. A sleek black limousine gleamed outside under the hotel's lights, its driver stepping out to open the rear door. For a moment, no one breathed. Then, Rebecca appeared. She was radiant. Her gown shimmered like midnight silk, hugging her figure with an elegance that silenced even the most critical eyes. Diamonds twinkled at her ears, catching the chandelier light. But it wasn't just the dress or the jewels, it was her presence. She carried herself with a poise and grace that made the entire room lean forward. She wasn't the timid woman people expected, she was transformed. At her side walked Nicholas, tall and effortlessly commanding, the billionaire whose name whispered across financial headlines. His hand rested gently at the small of Rebecca's back, protective yet reverent. Every gesture spoke of admiration, respect, and devotion. And then came the final shock. Little Daniel, their son, holding Rebecca's other hand, dressed in a miniature tuxedo that made him look like a prince. His innocent smile only deepened the awe of the scene. The crowd erupted into murmurs. "That's Nicholas Langford, is she with him? I thought she was broke." The words tangled together, their disbelief palpable. Andrew's smirk froze on his face. His chest tightened, his eyes wide. Vanessa shifted beside him, her grip tightening on his arm as she hissed, "What the hell is this?" Rebecca's eyes swept the room before landing on Andrew. She didn't shrink, didn't falter. Instead, she smiled, calm, serene, almost pitying. That smile alone was a dagger. Andrew felt it slice through his pride. The maitre d' hurried forward, bowing slightly as he welcomed Nicholas and Rebecca as if they were royalty. Guests flocked closer, desperate to greet the billionaire, eager to praise Rebecca's stunning transformation. Andrew and Vanessa, once the center of attention, were suddenly irrelevant. Rebecca walked slowly into the ballroom, every step deliberate. Her heels clicked against the marble like a drumbeat of power. Nicholas bent slightly, murmuring something into her ear that made her laugh softly, a laugh that was genuine, light, and filled with joy, a sound Andrew hadn't heard from her in years. "Daddy, look at the big lights," Daniel chirped, pointing up at the chandeliers. The single word, "Daddy," carried across the hush of the room, echoing louder than the orchestra. Guests turned sharply toward Andrew, eyebrows raised, whispers flaring like sparks in dry grass. Andrew's throat constricted, his polished mask cracked as his eyes darted from Daniel to Rebecca, then to the billionaire at her side. Vanessa tugged at his sleeve, mortified, her painted smile faltering as she realized the trap had backfired spectacularly. Rebecca stopped a few feet away, tilting her head as she regarded Andrew. For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of all the unspoken years. And then, with elegance sharper than any insult, she said softly, "Thank you for the invitation." The words were simple, polite even, but the sting was unmistakable. The crowd leaned in, sensing a story, their eyes shifting from Andrew's stiff, embarrassed stance to Rebecca's glowing, commanding presence. Tonight, the roles had reversed. Tonight, humiliation was no longer hers to bear. The ballroom seemed to vibrate with whispers after Rebecca's entrance, the hum of gossip growing louder with every passing second. Andrew's face had paled beneath the soft glow of the chandeliers, his jaw clenched so tightly a muscle ticked along his cheek. He wanted to stride across the floor, seize control of the moment, remind everyone whose party this was. But his feet felt heavy, rooted by disbelief. Nicholas, however, was in no hurry. He stood tall beside Rebecca, his presence magnetic, his calm smile commanding more respect than Andrew's forced bravado ever had. Guests clustered near, shaking Nicholas's hand, complimenting Rebecca's elegance, and leaning down to coo over little Daniel. The sight of strangers doting on the boy, his boy, made Andrew's throat burn. Finally, Andrew forced himself forward, Vanessa trailing behind, her hand gripping his arm like claws. "Rebecca," he said, his voice overly loud, attempting authority. "How surprising. You managed to come after all." Rebecca turned toward him, her eyes cool but steady. "You did invite me. It would have been rude not to accept." Her tone was soft, but layered with meaning only he could fully hear. Nicholas extended his hand smoothly. "Andrew, is it? I've heard so much." His polite smile carried just enough weight to feel like a dismissal rather than a greeting. Andrew shook his hand stiffly, hating the way Nicholas's confidence dwarfed his own. Vanessa, sensing her husband's falter, stepped forward. "Rebecca," she said with saccharine sweetness, "you look different. That dress must have cost." Nothing compared to my dignity, Rebecca cut in, her smile unwavering. But then again, some things aren't for sale. Gasps rustled through the nearby guests, and Vanessa's cheeks flushed crimson. Andrew cleared his throat, trying to salvage control. Well, he said, his voice strained, I see you've found company. He glanced toward Nicholas, his smirk returning in a weak imitation of confidence. But tell me, does he know? Does he know how you lived after you left me? How desperate you were? The words were meant to cut, to turn the crowd against her. But Rebecca didn't flinch. Instead, she bent slightly and smoothed Daniel's hair before looking Andrew directly in the eye. Yes, she said evenly. He knows everything, and unlike you, he never made me feel ashamed of surviving. The crowd murmured again, louder this time, eyes flicking between the ex-husband and the woman who stood with unshakable grace. Nicholas placed a hand on Rebecca's shoulder, his voice deep and steady. When Rebecca and I met, she was raising Daniel alone. She'd been abandoned with nothing but her strength. I saw a woman who refused to break, no matter how unfair life became. That kind of resilience is worth more than all the gold in this room. Rebecca's eyes glistened, but she held steady. The truth was spilling into the room, undoing years of Andrew's carefully crafted image. Then came the moment that shattered the last of Andrew's composure. Daniel tugged on Rebecca's hand, looking up with wide, innocent eyes. Mommy, is that man really my daddy? His small voice carried farther than anyone expected. Silence fell, heads turned, every guest waited for the answer. Andrew's face drained of color. He stammered, of course I'm. But Rebecca lifted her hand, stopping him. Her expression was calm, though her words cut like steel. Daniel, yes, Andrew is your biological father. But a father is more than blood. A father protects, supports, and loves without condition. That is something Andrew never learned to do. Nicholas crouched beside Daniel, his voice gentle. And you, young man, will always have me. I promise you that. Daniel's little face brightened as he hugged Nicholas around the neck, a gesture so natural, so filled with trust, that the crowd erupted in murmurs of approval. Andrew's chest heaved. Vanessa pulled at his arm, hissing through clenched teeth, everyone is watching. Do something. But there was nothing left to do. Every word, every glance from the guests confirmed it. Andrew was no longer the man of power in this room. His attempt to shame his ex-wife had only revealed his own cruelty. Rebecca straightened, her gaze sweeping the room before landing on him one final time. You wanted me here to humiliate me, she said, her voice clear and steady, carrying across the ballroom. But all you've managed is to expose yourself. Tonight, everyone sees the truth. I am not poor, Andrew, not in dignity, not in love, and certainly not in the family I have now. Applause broke out, soft at first, then louder as more guests joined in. It wasn't for Andrew, it was for her. He stood frozen, stripped of every ounce of control, as Rebecca turned and walked deeper into the ballroom with Nicholas and Daniel at her side. For the first time in his life, Andrew realized he was the one left small, forgotten, and pitied. The applause still echoed faintly as the orchestra resumed, though the mood of the ballroom had shifted entirely. Where once Andrew had been the center of admiration, now all eyes gravitated to Rebecca, Nicholas, and the little boy who clung to his mother's hand. The guests swirled around them, eager to offer compliments, eager to align themselves with the power and grace that radiated from the trio. Andrew stood stiff near the champagne tower, a hollow smile plastered on his face. Every laugh that drifted toward Rebecca felt like a dagger to his pride. Vanessa fumed beside him, her lips pressed into a thin line, her nails digging into his arm. This is a disaster, she whispered sharply. You brought her here to be humiliated, and instead you've humiliated yourself, and me. Do you even realize how ridiculous we look? Keep your voice down, Andrew snapped, though his voice cracked. He tried to lift his chin, to project the authority he once wielded so effortlessly, but his posture faltered beneath the weight of reality. The gazes of the room no longer sought him, they dismissed him. He was an afterthought at his own celebration. Meanwhile, Rebecca glided through the crowd as if she belonged to another world. People leaned in to shake her hand, praise her elegance, and commend her strength. Nicholas never left her side, his arm occasionally brushing hers, his smile warm and constant. He introduced her to business magnates and city leaders with the ease of a man proud of the woman beside him. Even Daniel soaked up the affection, receiving pats on the head and warm smiles that made his eyes sparkle. Andrew tried to intercept, to reassert himself. He approached with Vanessa in tow, attempting to gather authority. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced loudly, clinking his glass for attention. Let us not forget the reason we're here tonight, our anniversary. To celebrate love, loyalty, and... But his words were cut short by a sharp, derisive laugh from someone in the crowd. The sound spread into uncomfortable titters, then whispers. Loyalty. The irony was too thick. The guests looked at Rebecca, calm, radiant, supported, and then back at Andrew, whose voice faltered mid-toast. The silence that followed was heavier than applause, laced with judgment. Rebecca, ever composed, stepped forward. Allow me, she said smoothly, her voice carrying with ease. She raised her glass, eyes sweeping the room before settling briefly on Andrew. To new beginnings. To discovering that strength comes from standing back up when the world tries to push you down. And to knowing that real wealth is not measured in gold or status, but in love, integrity, and the family who stands by your side. The room erupted in applause again, louder, more sincere. The clinking of glasses followed, and every cheer was for her, not for Andrew. Nicholas's hand brushed hers as he lifted his own glass, pride shining in his eyes. Andrew felt his chest tighten, humiliation searing him from the inside. Vanessa yanked at his sleeve, muttering, I refuse to stand here and be mocked. With a final glare, she turned on her heel, striding out of the ballroom in a flurry of silken diamonds. Gasps followed her exit, and whispers of trouble in paradise spread like wildfire. Alone, Andrew stood exposed. His smile slipped entirely, his mask shattered. No one rushed to console him. No one even looked at him anymore. They had all moved on, flocking toward the woman he thought he had destroyed. Rebecca set her glass down and leaned toward Nicholas. He bent slightly so she could whisper, though the softness of her laugh afterward carried enough weight to sting Andrew from across the room. Daniel tugged at her hand, his small voice bright. Mommy, can we go home now? She bent down, pressing a kiss to his hair. Yes, sweetheart, we've done what we came for. Together, the three of them made their way toward the grand doors. The crowd parted as though royalty were leaving, offering warm smiles, handshakes, and farewells. Rebecca walked with her head high, her gown trailing like a banner of victory behind her. Nicholas held Daniel in one arm, his free hand guiding Rebecca with quiet pride. Andrew watched them go, his fists clenched, his throat tight with words he could not form. For years he had believed he held all the power, that his wealth and status made him untouchable. But tonight, in the ballroom he had once ruled, he was nothing more than a bitter shadow. Rebecca paused at the doorway, glancing back just once. Their eyes met, and she gave him a smile, not cruel, not triumphant, but final. It was the smile of a woman who had let go of the past, who no longer carried his weight. Then she turned, stepping into the night with her son and the man who loved her. The limousine door closed with a soft click, the car gliding away under the city lights. Inside, laughter filled the air, Daniel's sweet giggles, Nicholas's low chuckle, Rebecca's relieved sigh. For the first time in years, she felt free. And in the ballroom, Andrew stood alone, stripped of pride, left to drown in the silence of his own downfall.